Shana Tova, Boker Tov. Oh my God, let's try that one more time. Good morning, everyone. Lashana Tova, Boker Tov.
Shana Tova.
Excellent. Okay. I can see. For some of us, we're still sort of getting here. So whether you're on the live stream, the Zoom, or present here at our home for the holidays, Plymouth Church, with much gratitude to Plymouth, we are gathered again after a year's interlude of being away for our Days of Awe. This year, we have some special seating arrangements, so I'm just going to review how the sanctuary is working for the very best safety and convenience. Our upper level is totally closed off based on the advice of our epidemiologists, so please do not go and position yourself upstairs. This side of the sanctuary from my finger over is intended for anyone who wants to sit here, but especially for families with children 11 and under who are unvaccinated and masked. The center aisle here, I feel like I'm the flight attendant, right? This center aisle is for anyone who is vaccinated and masked and doesn't mind sitting right next to one another. And this side of the sanctuary is intended for everyone, right, is masked. Those who are vaccinated, masked, and would like to social distance. So there is some tape on the pews, and the goal is so that those who are, if you're a family, you can sit together, but make sure you're creating some space, 6 feet, the magic circle, so that those around you can still physically distance. The choir, of course, is over here. I'm going to remind you that the choir and the cantor and I and our Baal Tekiah have all had our PCR exams in recent days, just to be especially cautious since we are making a lot of noise and singing. The CDC has opinions about such gatherings, which I am obliged to share with you, which is, while we can encourage you to read along in a soft voice and even hum along, the CDC recommends no singing, because that involves a lot more moving of air, except from our choir, the cantor, and myself, and that's why we've had the PCR exams. So I've now shared the recommendation of the CDC, and I think it's a good recommendation, but as always, you're adults, and we'll make choices, and we encourage you to make good choices. I want to remind you, as people come in, that one of the nicest things you can continue to do is let them know what, say hello, good morning, Lashana Tova. Those are nice things. Make eye contact, and maybe mention what page we're on in the holiday mafsor, in our prayer book. We have people following on live stream and Zoom, and there is a link someplace there to a flip book. The flip book is provided by the Central Conference of American Rabbis, and it coordinates page by page with the hard copy Mishkan HaNefesh, the tabernacle of the spirit, the soul, that we are using in Plymouth today. So I will be calling out a tremendous number of page numbers and quadrants, upper left, lower right, stand on your head, no. So if you notice I'm doing that, it's simply so that you and those at a distance can know where we are. Our machzor, our prayer book, is not intended. Last year we didn't use it. We just had that PDF that we created in-house. but the Mishkan HaNefesh has far more material than we could possibly use, so it's our custom to make a choice on each page and then move along, and that's why we are calling out these numbers. Please do know that we encourage you to be focused in the moment. If you don't want to read along with us, that's fine. There's a lot on the page. Take advantage of it. If your spiritual experience of the new year is just reading the commentary below the line, I can think of far worse things to be doing at the new year. Finally, if there is someone seated next to you who you don't know yet, please make sure you introduce yourself and be welcoming. I know that we're all mask blind these days and can't recognize one another. So take a moment, wish a good Yontif, L'Shana Tova, introduce yourself by name, and then we're going to hum along with the cantor in the choir with Ma Tovu on page 110. We are on page 112, and before we continue with our prayer service, I omitted one of those very important reminders. If you have a device, you know the rest, right? So if you came equipped with one of these, can you please silence it, put it on vibrate, even better yet, put it in airplane mode, power it down. Now is the time to hear all of those little symphonies, Chas v'Sholom, when the cantor is chanting Torah, or the choir is singing, or something else. So just double check. Maybe you don't even remember you brought it with you. So set it to silent, power it down, turn it in airplane mode. Thank you. We join together in the benediction for the study of Torah, our traditional way of beginning the morning. Please join with me. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, supreme power of the universe. You sanctify our lives with mitzvot and give us the sacred obligation of learning and living Torah together. Our God, eternal, let us taste the sweetness of your Torah's words and let them give pleasure to your people, the house of Israel, so that we, our children, and all generations of Israel to come, shall know your name and study your Torah for its own sake. Baruch atah Adonai, hamelamed Torah la'amo Yisrael. Blessed are you, Adonai, who instructs your people Israel in the ways of Torah. Page 122. Page 122, as the cantor leads us in the prayer for our souls.
Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi ata verata ata yitzarta ata ואתה משמרה בקרבי כל זמן שהנשמה בקרבי מודה אני לפניך אדוני אלוהי ואלוהי אבותי מודה אני לפניך אדוני אלוהי ואלוהי אמותי ריבון מעשים אדון כל הנשמות ברוך אתה אדוני אשר בידו נפש כל חי ורוח כל בשר
Page 124, I believe. We join in Psuke de Zimra in the English. That's actually just a little bit ahead. Page 130. We join together in the English on page 130. Blessed is the one who spoke the world into being. Praised is God. Praise the one who is ever creating. Praise the one who creates with a word. Praise the one whose vision is made real. Praise the one who loves the earth. Praise the one who loves earth's creatures. Praise the one whose worshippers know goodness.
Praise the one whose life and being last forever.
Praise the one who rescues and sets free. Blessed is your name. Our sovereign, we praise you with songs of celebration. Your oneness is the life of the cosmos. Baruch atah Adonai, melech mehulal b'tishbachot. Blessed are you, Adonai. Your majesty is celebrated in songs of praise. We turn ahead to page 135 with Psalm 150.
Hallelujah, הנשמה תהלליה. הללויה, 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 הללויה.
We turn ahead. We are at page 138. Holy One, infinite is your power, radiant your glory, unbounded is your might, awe-inspiring are your works.
המלך יושב על כיסא רם ונישא, שוכן עד מרום וקדוש שמו, וכתוב רננו צדיקים באדוני, לישרים נאוות תהילה.
Page 140. By the mouths of the upright you are raised up, in the words of the righteous you are blessed. On the tongues of the pious you are sanctified, and in the midst of the holy you are praised. Your people by the thousands sings to glorify your name. In all generations we give voice to your sovereignty. Our sovereign God, source of holiness and greatness, may your name be praised forever in this world and beyond. Eternal One, God of our mothers and our fathers, your strength, sanctity, glory, and dominion are deserving of song, praise, poetry, hymns, sacred chant, and blessings of thankfulness for all time and eternity. Together, blessed are you, Adonai, sovereign of praise, source of the impulse to give thanks, crown of wonders who desires a world filled with song and a universe of life. Please rise.
שמי רבה אמן, בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל עגלה, ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יש מרבה מבורך לעולם ולעלמי עולמי יתברך וישתבח ויתפעל ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי לקדושה בריחו לעילא ולעילא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן דעלמא ואמרו
142, the call to worship. Seated, everyone. Source of blessing, our eternal God, your power fills the cosmos, shaping light, creating darkness, making peace and fashioning all things. Infinite light is preserved in life's treasure house. Lights from the darkness, said God, and it was so. In love, you bring light to the earth and its creatures. Your goodness renews the creation each day. Infinite, varied, and rich are your works, O divine artist. All of them wrought with wisdom. The whole earth is teeming with life. Awestruck by the universe work of your hands, let all life bless you, praise you, and celebrate the beauty of your lights. May you shine a new light on Zion, and may we soon be privileged to share in that light. Our praise to you, Adonai, creator of the cosmic lights. We continue on page 146. As we join in the singing of the Ha'er Enenu toward the bottom of the Hebrew 6 lines up. Bring us in peace from the four corners of the earth. Lead us with upright pride to the land that is ours. For you are a God of miracles and wonders. From all the peoples of the earth, you sought us out and brought us near to your great enduring truth. So with love, we acknowledge and proclaim that you are one.
Baruch atah Adonai, haboche be'amo Yisrael be'ahava. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Mahodo, Leolam Va'ed.
Page 152.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי הייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמן.
Page 163. Remember the stories of slavery, and you will never stop working for freedom. Remember their fear at the edge of the sea, and self-doubt will never defeat you. Remember when desperation turned to celebration, and you will never let go of hope. Remember the words of the Baal Shem Tov, forgetfulness leads to exile. Remembrance is the secret of our redemption. God responds to the cry of our people, their prayer in time of need. Sing praise to God Most High, most blessed source of blessing, as Moses, Miriam, and all Israel sang this joyous song to you. The words of Micha Mocha, page 164.
חדשה שבחוג גאולים לשמך על שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם. צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל. גאלנו, אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל. ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
We rise for Tefillah, page 166.
Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. זוכרנו לחיים, ולכבד בחיים, וכתבנו בספר החיים, למענך אלוהים חיים. Yatsara.
Page 170.
אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה, רב להושיע, מוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חונים ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר, מחמוך בעל גבורות ומדום אליו, מלך מביט ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, מי כמוך אל הרחמים, זוכר יצוריו לחיים ברחמים, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל, ברוך אתה אדוני לחיי הכל. Amen.
Please be seated, everyone. We are at page 174 at the words of Unatana Tokef. One of the names for this day, this new year, is the Day of Judgment. It is not a day of celebration, but rather a day of reflection, a day in which tradition affirmed that we and all creatures, even the angels on high, are judged not by an arbitrary authority, but rather by our very own deeds, that the words of the book of life which we have inscribed lay open before us, and we are asked to judge our merit or dismerit. The words of Unatana Tokef remind us of the power and link it with the events of the world around us, hoping to inspire us to do better in the year to come. Page 174. Together in the English, let us proclaim the power of this day, a day whose holiness awakens deepest awe and inspires highest praise for your dominion. For your throne is a throne of love, Your reign is a reign of truth. In truth, you are judge and plaintiff, counselor and witness. You inscribe and seal, you record and recount. You remember all that we have forgotten, and when you open the book of memories, it speaks for itself. For every human hand leaves its mark, an imprint like no other. Page 176.
ובשופר גדול ייתקע, וכל דממה דקה יישמע. המלאכים חפזון, יכילו רדם יאחזון, ויאמרו הנה יום הדין, הנה יום הדין, לבכות על צבא מרום, על צבא מרום בדין, כי לא יזכור בינך בדין, בדין לבכות על צבא מרום, על צבא מרום בדין, כי לא יזכור בינך בדין.
Together in the English, and so a great shofar will cry Tekiah. A still small voice will be heard. Angels in a whirl of fear and trembling will say, behold the day of judgment, for they too are judged. In your eyes even they are not blameless. All who come into the world pass before you like sheep before their shepherd. As a shepherd considers the flock when it passes beneath the staff, you count and consider every life. You set bounds, you decide destiny, you inscribe judgments. The middle of page 178. On Rosh Hashanah, this is written.
On the fast of Yom Kippur, this is sealed.
How many will pass away from this world?
How many will be born into it?
Who will live and who will die?
Who will reach the ripeness of age?
Who will be taken before their time?
Who by fire and who by water?
Who by war and who by beast?
Who by famine and who by drought?
Who by earthquake and who by plague?
Who by strangling and who by stoning?
Who will rest and who will wander?
Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled?
Who will be calm and who tormented?
Who will live in poverty and who in prosperity?
Who will be humbled and who exalted?
Viva יפה מי בחניקה ומי בסקילה בראש השנה יקדמו וביום צום כיפור יקדמו בראש השנה יקדמו וביום צום כיפור יקדמו מי ינוח ומי ינוח מי ישיר ומי יתערב מי ישלם ומי יתייסר מי יעני ומי יעשיר מי יושפל ומי יערום בראש השנה יקדמו וביום צום כיפור יקדמו בראש השנה יקדמו וביום צום כיפור יקדמו
Page 180.
ותשכבה ותפילה וצדקה מעביר את רוע הגזרה
Together, but through return to the right path, through prayer and righteous giving, we can transcend the harshness of the decree. You are everything that we praise you for, slow to anger, quick to forgive. You do not wish the death of sinners, but urge them to return from their ways and live. Until the day of death, you wait for them. You accept them at once if they return. Since you created us, you know our impulses. We are but flesh and blood. We who are mortal, our origin is dust, and so is our end. We wear out our lives to get our bread, like broken vessels, like withered grass, like a flower that must fade, mere dust on the wind, a dream that flies away. But for you, ever-living sovereign, time has no limits. Your presence, unbounded by days and years, is everywhere, a glorious mystery none can decipher. Your name is worthy of you, and you are worthy of your name, and our name you have linked with yours. We rise now for Kedusha, page 184.
נקדש, נקדש, נקדש את שמך בעולם, נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום. ככתוב על יד נביאיך וכרזה עשה באמר. קדוש, קדוש, קדוש אדוני צבאות, מלוך על הארץ כבודו. אדיר, אדירנו, אדיר, אדירנו, אדוני, אדוני, אדוננו, מאדיר, מאדיר שמך בכל נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, ושיבך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי אין מלך גדול וקדוש אתה.
Page 187, we read responsively, Holy is the dignity that is human, sacred the mystery we call divine. Holy is the sacrifice made for those we love, precious the pains they take for us. Sublime the beauty of the heavens above us, sacred the beauty that glows within us. Noble is the mind in search of meaning, the heart is happy that finds its way. Awesome is the power that rules our being, holy the kinship that makes us one. Page 189. By its mere existence, Judaism is a never silent protest against the assumption of the multitude that force is superior to truth. Just because it was always a minority, Judaism has become a standard of measurement of the law of morality. How the Jewish community has been treated by the nations among which it has lived is always a measure of the extent to which right and justice have prevailed. For the measure of justice is always its application to the few. It requires religious courage to belong to a minority, such as Judaism. Always has been, always will be. For many days will come and go before the messianic time arrives. Page 190. Together, and so in your holiness, give the righteous the gift of a vision bright with joy, a world where evil has no voice, and the rule of malevolence fades like wisps of smoke. Good people everywhere will celebrate the stunning sight of arrogance gone from the earth. Page 192. Together you, and you alone, Adonai, will reign over creation. Upon Mount Zion, home of your presence, and in Jerusalem, a city set apart by you. As the psalmist believed, Adonai will reign eternally, your God Zion, for all generations. Hallelujah. You are holy, your name is awesome. There is nothing divine beyond you. As the prophet Isaiah taught, the source of all might is exalted through justice, the God of holiness made holy through righteousness.
Baruch atah Adonai, HaMelech HaKadosh. Amen.
Page 195. This people's true history is a history of encounters with God. It has this history for its own sake and for the sake of humanity. It bears it and is born by it. Every people is a question which God addresses to humanity, and every people, from its own place with its special talents and possibilities, must answer for its own sake and for the sake of humanity. Page 196 together. Our God and God of the generations before us, may a memory of us ascend and come before you. May it be heard and seen by you, winning your favor and reaching your awareness, together with the memory of our ancestors, the memory of your sacred city, Jerusalem, and the memory of your people, the family of Israel. May we be remembered for safety, well-being, and favor, for love and compassion, for life and for peace, on this day of remembrance. Zochreinu Adonai Eloheinu bo letova. Eternal our God, remember us. Ufokdeinu bo livracha. Be mindful of us. V'hoshienu bo lechayim. And redeem us for a life of goodness and blessing. Page 198. Together, God who is ours and God of our mothers and fathers, in your glory, reign over the infinite expanse of space and time. In your grandeur, be exalted through your power. Show us your reality. Then all who dwell on earth shall understand that you are their maker. Astound us with the beauty of your presence, so that every breath of life shall say, eternal is the God of Israel, all-embracing God's rule and sovereignty. Page 208. Together, God who is ours and God of our fathers and our mothers, lead us to holiness through your mitzvot, and may each of us find a portion of Torah that is ours. You bestow such goodness. Teach us to be satisfied and to know the joy of your salvation. Help us to serve you truly with purity of heart, for you are a faithful God whose truth stands forever. Our praise to you, Eternal One, whose power pervades all the earth. You bring holiness to the people Israel and to this day of remembrance.
Baruch atah Adonai, melech al kol haaretz v'kadesh Yisrael, melech al kol haaretz v'kadesh Yisrael, v'yom hazikaron.
Page 209, we join together. Eternal our God, your people Israel yearns for your favor. Receive our prayer with love and acceptance, and may you always desire your people's worship. Divine One, close to all who call upon you, bring your grace and presence near to those who serve you. Pour forth your Spirit on us, and may our eyes see your merciful return to Zion. Blessed are you whose divine presence is felt again in Zion. Page 210. God who is ours, God of all generations, to you we are grateful forever. Rock and protector of our lives, your saving power endures from age to age. We thank you and we tell the tale of your praise, your power in our lives, your caring for our souls, the constant miracle of your kindness. Morning, noon, and night, we call you goodness, for your compassion never ends. We call you mercy, for your love has no limit. We call you hope, now and for all time. And for all these gifts, God of majesty, may your name come to be blessed and praised, our gratitude a daily offering until the end of time. Inscribe your covenant partners for a life of goodness, and may all life resound with gratitude and faith in praise of your name. God, you free us and strengthen us. Blessed are you, Adonai, whose goodness deserves thanks and praise.
Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, kein yahir ratzon. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'choneka, kein yahir ratzon. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom, ken yehi ratzon.
We invite those who wish to have a seat as we come to our final prayer of tefillah, Sim Shalom, on page 216. Page 216.
Sim shalom, tov uvracha ba'olam, chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael
We take these moments now for our own silent prayer and meditation. You'll find a traditional text in the English on page 218, some more contemporary readings on page 219. Many of us are uncomfortable with periods of silence. It's the nature of the world we live in. It certainly plays out in my own home. But the notion that we only pray what's scripted for us would have been anathema to the sages. They felt that it was important for us to craft our own words. Having prayed their words that they did indeed craft for us, they felt that it was incomplete, that we had to dig within ourselves and find something that was truly personal. If you look at the meditation, the commentary at the bottom of page 220, may the words of my mouth, which we're about to hear in the Hebrew, Psalm 19:15, a teaching attributed to Rebbe Levi Yitzhak of Berdichev. Levi Yitzhak's descendants, Ida and Izzy Guterman, were members of our congregation, as Steve and Betty still are. When we pray, our goal should not be for God to fulfill our desires and provide the things that we think we need. This demeans the Holy One and makes God our servant. Rather, we should pray to align our wishes and desires with God's. This is the meaning of the statement in Mishnah Avot, do not make your prayer fixed. That is, do not set your heart and become fixated on God's giving you what you want. invite you to rise as we open the Ark for Avinu Malkeinu, page 223. Page 223, Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, Almighty and merciful, hear our voice.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu Lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, we have strayed and sinned before you.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol Aleinu, Va'alol Aleinu, V'tapenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion on us and our families.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kalei Dever, V'cherev, V'ra'av Me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the onslaught of sickness, violence, and hunger.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kalei Kol Tsar, Umastin Me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause pain and terror.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kotvenu, B'sefer Chayim Tovim.
Avinu Malkeinu, enter our names in the book of lives well lived.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kadesh Aleinu, Shana Tova. Avinu Malkeinu, renew for us a year of goodness. Avinu Malkeinu, Almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love. Page 227. 226. We are the people of the book. Through fire and mud and dust, we have borne our scrolls tenderly, as a baby swaddled in a blanket, traveling with our words sewn in our clothes and carried on our backs. Let us take up the scroll of Torah and dance with it, touch it, read it out, for the mind touches the word and makes it light. So does light enter us, and we shine.
Ein kamocha v'Elohim Adonai, ve'en kama'asecha, malchutecha, malchut kol olamim, u'memshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai melech, Adonai yimloch le'olam v'ed. Adonai oz le'amo yitein. Adonai yivarech et amo b'shalom. Avara
Adonai, God compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, loving and true, showing mercy to the 1,000th generation, forgiving evil, defiance, and wrongdoing, granting pardon.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonai, Kadosh v'nora Shemo. Gadol Adonai iti, u'neru b'ma Shemo yachdav.
Please be seated, everyone. You have to raise your eyes and see beyond the moment, right? There will come a time in 5782. The Torah will yet process through the congregation, and we will touch and embrace, not quite yet, but in the year. If you've been davening, praying, worshiping, attending, showing up to Brooklyn Heights Synagogue, you know that like many Reform synagogues, we've switched the narrative that we read on Rosh Hashanah morning. Now, one might ask the question, what should we be reading on Rosh Hashanah morning? Suffice to say, there is nothing in the Torah that says, Moses, here's what I'd like you to read on Rosh Hashanah morning. In fact, the Mishnah has a different reading for Rosh Hashanah morning. So what shall we read? Well, the simplest thing to read might be Leviticus 23, that instructs us that the first day of the 7th month shall be the day of echo blasts. That's what we know, the day we sound the shofar. That is, in fact, what used to be the assigned reading for this day. The rabbis declared today, Hayom Harat HaOlam. This is the day of the world's birth, or properly conception. This is the day when the world is conceived and brought about. So perhaps we should read, as we do tomorrow in many Reform synagogues, the first of 3 occasions of reading the creation narrative. Genesis 1 through 2, verse 3. That would be a good choice, especially because my beloved had that as her Simchat Torah Bat Mitzvah reading, and I love to hear her chant it. Interestingly, though, the reading that is traditionally read on the first day of Rosh Hashanah is the birth of Isaac. Anyone grow up going to a traditional Orthodox synagogue? That's what you heard on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, was the birth of Isaac. Not quite quotidian, because every birth is a small miracle, and certainly given Abraham and Sarah's ages, quite a large miracle. But nevertheless, that is the reading for the first day. But it has been overshadowed, of course, by the next chapter, which is the second day Rosh Hashanah reading, which is, of course, the binding of Isaac, the Akedah, which, as movie makers might point out, is a much more interesting narrative to portray than simply a birth narrative. Why focus on that? What do we read? Well, we read back a little bit. We read a different Abraham story. This is the season of renewal. We have been reading in Deuteronomy, and we are preparing ourselves to turn the Torah back to its first memories, to the memories of our founding family: Abraham, Sarah, Hagar, Ishmael, Isaac, and all who journeyed with them. It is not, in fact, a fairy tale. It is not, in fact, a story that you read and are comforted by. I love reading through Genesis because if these people can have a relationship with God, with all their failings and foibles, maybe there's hope for me and the rest of us. Even in the end, Abe, Ike, and Jake, right? Our family, they're at least as messed up as all of us are. So when we switched our reading several years ago from the story of the binding of Isaac, which became popular in the Reform movement as one day, because in the Reform movement we follow the ancient custom, the biblical custom, Leviticus 23, one day Rosh Hashanah, not two. It became customary in American Reformed synagogues to just read the binding of Isaac because it seemed to present an existential quandary about how far we would go in our loyalty to God. The general explanation of that generation 100 years ago was that Abraham passed the test and God withheld his hand and all was well and good. Isaac's bills from the psychologist's couch were not calculated into that, of course. And as I like to point out to my students, Isaac and Abraham never spoke a word to each other after that, and Sarah dies in the next chapter. If that's a successful family story, we could do better. The reason this story so appealed to generations, of course, is that not only were we a minority, we were a persecuted minority. What was asked of us was intolerable. And sometimes what was asked of our children was worse. And so many a generation found comfort in the notion of a God who at the last minute would insert God's self and withhold the destructive hand and rescue the child. That was enough. For our generation, which has lived in relative comfort and security, the other elements of the story became troubling, not only for us Reformed Jews, but for Orthodox Jews and others as well. Our teacher, Rabbi David Hartman, points this out in his book where he talks about his own teacher, Rabbi Soloveitchik, and the lonely man of faith. Who are we to be as Jews? Which Abraham, which is presented within the Torah? Are we the Abraham who silently and almost blindly goes about an impossible commandment of offering up his child on a mountaintop as a sacrifice without complaint, without argument? In the end, yes, it doesn't come about. The story is a story of Isaac's survival, and indeed, perhaps it is a story in faith that everything in the end will work out. But the story that we have chosen to read, not only in the Reform movement, but even at the advice of Rabbi Hartman, an Orthodox rabbinic teacher, is a different Abraham story, one more appropriate for our generation, part of the many stories of our founding family. This is the story of Abraham we resonate with. Chutzpahdik, argumentative, in God's face. Will not the judge of all the world judge justly? Abraham says to God. This is no shrinking violet of an Abraham. This is an Abraham who calls even God to account, and like our generation, believes that even God answers perhaps to something greater, justice. If God is anything, God embodies, we hope, what is just and what is right. And so we have made the choice to turn to this story because it's preferable, right? But here's the problem. In the end, Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed. So we have two stories. We have a story we're not reading, where Abraham, in blind faith, follows God's command, and in the end it works out okay. Isaac survives. And then we have a different story. We're proud of Abraham. He argues. And God says, if there are 10 righteous people, I will not destroy the cities. But what happens? There are 4. Lot, his unnamed wife, and his daughters. They flee, and the cities are indeed destroyed. 2 stories that I think have a commonality to them, which is they don't have endings that one would expect. They are not narratives written by a novelist. They are instead stories that reflect real life, the imperfect outcome. Don't we wish that instead Abraham had saved the cities? That Sodom and Gomorrah survived because of Abraham's righteous argument with God, but the world doesn't really work that way. And sometimes people do things that we can't understand, and it works out okay too. Sometimes people bring their children along on a journey for a higher vision, and however scarred, those children move along to another generation. I would invite us then to hear these stories and take away from them the fact that they represent our ancestors conveying to us the challenge of life, the challenge of encountering the divine, and the imperfect outcomes or successful outcomes, unexpected, that resonate with our own stories, our own lives. You can find the text this morning for the story of Abraham arguing about Sodom and Gomorrah, the city where his nephew Lot and Lot's family live. You'll find that in the back of the book on page 334. I know you all know this, but obviously we've had no honors because we're trying not to have people come up and down. The cantor is going to be chanting through the entirety of the story with no break. I am going to invite you, the congregation, to arise in a moment and join with us in the making of the benediction on the Torah. Is the bencher on your side? No? The big plastic bencher. It's missing in action. Okay, that's fine.
That was on the page.
Yeah, it's okay. You can find the benediction.
230.
Page 230. Please rise, everyone. Page 230. You sneak over there. I'm gonna sneak over here.
Let's just find it before they start.
Too many pieces of paper. That's why they liked parchment. Fewer pieces. Amber, just lift your foot a second. Thank you. Tell me when you're there.
I'm just gonna find it.
It's in the middle.
This one.
Right? But you didn't say lots. Hang on, we're too far. Got it, yeah. Okay. Good?
Yep.
1, 2, 3. Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bacharanu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai Notei HaTorah.
Amen. You can sit if you'd like.
אמן. ויקום משם אנשים, וישקיפו על פני סדום, ואברהם הולך עמם בשכם. ואדוני אמר, מכסה אני מאברהם אשר אני עושה. מאברהם היה יהיה לגוי גדול ועצום, ונברכו בו כל גויי הארץ. כי רטיב למען אשר יצווה את בניו ואת ביתו אחריו, ושמרו דרך אדוני לעשות צדקה ומשפט, למען הביא אדוני אל אברהם את אשר דיבר עליו.
We're at verse 20.
ויאמר אדוני צעקת סדום ועמורה כי רבה וחטאתם כי כבדה מאוד. אל דנה ואראה צעקתה הבאה אלי עשו קלה ואם לא אדע. ויפנו משם אנשים וילכו סדומה, ואברהם עודנו עומד לפני אדוני. ויגש אברהם ויאמר, אהבתי שונא צדיק עם רשע, אולי יש 50 צדיקים בתוך העיר. האב תספה ולא תיסע למקום, למען 50 הצדיקים אשר בקרבה.
Verse 25.
חלילה לך מעשות כדבר הזה, להעמיד צדיק עם רשע, והיה כצדיק כרשע. חלילה לך השפי כל הארץ, לא יעשה משפט. ויאמר אדוני, אם אמצא בסדום 50 צדיקים בתוך העיר, ונסעתי לכל המקום בעבורם. ויען אברהם ויאמר, הננה הואלתי לדבר אל אדוני, ואנוכי עפר ואפר. אולי יחסרון 50 הצדיקים 5, התשחית ב5 את כל העיר. ויאמר לו אשחית, אם אמצא שם 45. ויוסף עוד לדבר אליו ויאמר, אולי ימצאון שם 40. ויאמר לא אעשה בעבור 40.
Verse 30.
ויאמר אל נא יחל אדוני ואדברה, אולי ימצאון שם 30. ויאמר לא אעשה אם אמצא שם 30. ויאמר הננה הואלתי לדבר אל אדוני, אולי ימצאון שם 20. ויאמר לו אשחית בעבור 20.
Verse 32.
ויאמר אל נא יחל אדוני ואדברה אף הפעם, אולי ימצאון שם 10. ויאמר לו אשחית בעבור 10. וילך אדוני כאשר קילה לדבר אל אברהם, ואברהם שב למקומו.
Let me invite you to rise again as you are able, in body or spirit, as we join in the closing benediction. Again, you can find that on page 230. 1, 2, 3.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'ha'olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Please be seated, everyone. And the men, the angels, got up from there, and they gazed towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them to guide them. And Adonai thought, shall I hide from Abraham what I am doing? Abraham, after all, will be a great and populous nation, through whom all the earth's nations will be blessed. For I have singled him out, so that he will charge his children and his family after him to follow the ways of Adonai, doing what is right and just, so that Adonai may bestow upon Abraham what he has promised. And Adonai said, Sodom and Gomorrah, how great the outcry, and their wrongdoing, how very grave. Let me go down and see if indeed they have acted according to the cry that has reached me, and if not, I will know. So the men, the angels, turned away from there to go toward Sodom, while Abraham continued standing before Adonai. Then Abraham came near and said, "Will you sweep away righteous and wicked alike?" By the way, that term tzaddik here really means innocent, right? The innocent and the guilty. That would be a better translation. Will you sweep the innocent and guilty alike? Perhaps there are 50 innocent people inside the city. Will you sweep away and not forgive the place for the sake of the 50 innocent ones in its midst? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to rain death upon both the innocent and the guilty, treating the innocent and guilty alike. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of the whole earth do justice? If you want a definition of Jewish chutzpah, here we go. And Adonai said, "If I find in Sodom 50 innocent people within the city, I will forgive the entire place for their sake." And Abraham answered and he said, "Here, I have presumed to speak to my Lord, though I am but dust and ashes. Perhaps the 50 innocent will lack 5. Would you destroy the entire city for the lack of 5? And Adonai said, "I will not destroy it if I find there 45. And Abraham spoke yet again and said, "Perhaps only 40 will be found there." And Adonai said, "For the sake of 40, I will not do it." And Abraham said, "Please let my Lord not be angry, but allow me to speak further. Perhaps 30 will be found there." And Adonai said, "I will not do it if I find 30 there." And Abraham said, "Here, I have presumed to speak to my Lord, but perhaps 20 will be found there." And Adonai said, "For the sake of 20, I will not destroy." And Abraham said, "Please let my Lord not be angry, but allow me to speak one last time. Perhaps only 10 will be found there." And Adonai said, "For the sake of 10, I will not destroy." And Adonai departed, having finished speaking with Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. It's worth asking, why doesn't Abraham say one innocent? Right? It's a good question. 10, of course, we know constitutes community. And perhaps the notion is you can't maintain a city without a community. And we know what happens. The 4 who are considered innocent, Lot, his wives and daughters, are ushered out of the city by the angels. I'll ask you to please rise now. Actually, before we rise, while the Torah is still open, we're going to offer prayers on behalf of those in need of healing and blessing. You'll find Debbie Friedman's setting of the Mishaberach on page 245. We call to mind these names that have already been shared with us: Freddie Orlando Casaya, Lynn Shapiro, David Stephen Cohen, Lori Blum, Sandra Spannon, Shirley Applebaum, Peggy Einhorn, Bela Rivka bat Esther Vishmul Pesach, Robert Mallon, Chaya Malka bat Chaya, Gloria Sancho, Jenny St. George, Arthur Rose, Aksan Faruqi, Elia ben Label Begita Henya, Chava Gittel bat Freda, Yona bat Ephraim, Yehezkel Miriam, Yona Chaya bat Miriam, Davida, Ruth bat Binyamin Bechava, Steve Brown Inns, Yona Tevia ben Label Begita Henya, Renee Fishzone, Helene Furman Gold, Moshe ben Leah, Nancy Lazar, Delroy Aline, Alan Eisner, Yuval Gilbert, Max Estroff, and Richard Salter. If there are other names that should be shared aloud for healing and blessing, something minor, modest, or major, I invite you to share those names aloud as my hand comes across the congregation.
May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing and let us say Amen. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Kei Ihi Ratzon, may it be God's will. I'll invite everyone to please rise as the Torah is presented to the congregation.
וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ליד משה. וזאת התורה אשר שם משה, וזאת התורה, וזאת התורה אשר שם משה, וזאת התורה.
Please be seated, everyone. The cantor is going to share with us the Haftarah. Thank you.
The blessings are on page 247, and the Haftarah is page 340.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar minbiim tovim ורצה בדבריהם הנאמרים באמת. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בתורה ובמשה עבדו ובישראל עמו בנביאי האמת בצדק. ויאספו כל העם כאיש אחד אל הרחוב אשר לפני שער המים, ויאמרו לעזרא הסופר להביא את ספר תורת משה אשר ציווה אדוני את ישראל. ויביא עזרא הכהן את התורה לפני הקהל מאיש ועד אישה וכל מבין לשמוע. ביום אחד לחודש השביעי ויקרבו לפני הרחוב אשר לפני שער המים מן האור עד מחצית היום נגד האנשים והנשים והמבינים. ואוזני כל העם אל ספר התורה. ויעמוד עזרא הסופר אל מגדל עץ אשר עשו לדבר, ויעמוד אצלו מתתיה ושמע ועניה ואוריה וחלקיליה ומעשיה על ימינו ומשמאלו פדיה ומישאל ומלכיה והשבדנה, זכריה משולם. ויפתח עזרא הספר לעיני כל העם, כי מעל כל העם היה, ופתחו עמדו כל העם. ויברך עזרא את אדוני האלוהים הגדול, ויענו כל העם, אמן אמן, במועל ידיהם. ויקדו וישתחוו לאדוני אפיים ארצה, וישו ובנוי, ושרב ימין, עקוב שבתי הודיעה מעשיה, קליטה עזריה, יוזבד הנן פליה, והלוויים מבינים את העם לתורה, והעם על עומדם. ויקראו בספר תורת האלוהים מפורש, ושום שכל, ויבינו במקרא.
Verse 9.
ויאמר נחמיהו התירשתה, ועזרא הכהן הסופר, והלוויים המבינים את העם לכל העם. היום קדוש הוא אדוני אלוהיכם. אל תתאבלו ואל תבכו, כי בוכים כל העם כשמעם את דברי התורה. ויאמר להם לכו, אכלו משמנים ושתו ממתקים, ושילחו מנות לאין נכון לו, כי קדוש היום לאדוננו. ואל תעצבו, כי חדבת אדוני היא מעוזכם.
Page 259.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, צור כל העולמים, צדיק בכל הדורות, האל הנאמן האומר ועושה, המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת בצדק. על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום הזיכרון הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי, תמיד לעולם ועד, ודברך אמת וקיים לעד. ברוך אתה אדוני
ברוך שמו
מלך כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל ביום הזיכרון.
We are going to turn to page 199. So usually I offer an introduction to the shofar service. I'll say simply, the shofar service affirms God's sovereignty in the world. We as Jews gather together at the New Year, and like many ancient peoples, we affirm that our sovereign is sovereign. But rather than a human sovereign, Jews once a year affirm that God is sovereign. This is a very ancient undertaking and the origin of our Aleinu prayer, which is recited at every service today. What I will share with you at somewhat greater length is a thank you to Drs. Jack Dehovitz and Sharon Maripol. Cantor Porzakansky and I have been on Zoom videos with them, debating the safety of blowing shofar now for several weeks. And although it's very easy to poo-poo, as we say in my family, some of these concerns, of course, we've had to take many different institutions. We have the rules here at Plymouth. We have our own reopening task force. And then, as we like to say, we answer to a higher authority. So we've had to make sure that as we prepared for this especially, that we made a set of choices that would work for the community but also be safe. Stuart Sachs and Zoe, who are our balei tekiah, our shofar blowers, therefore, are going to be stepping, not yet, don't leave yet. Don't leave yet, we're not blowing quite this second, are going to actually be blowing shofar outside under the veranda. You'll hear them fine. We're not worried about that. You can always hear Stuart fine. It's never really a problem. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Zoe. But I want you to know that the preparation for this year was a little bit less spiritual and perhaps just a little bit more technical from reading about masks, the special masks you see the choir reading. I know it feels easy to say, but I read in the paper this week, and of course there's a lot of competing information, but of course we answer to many different communities. And again, our gratitude to Plymouth Church for allowing us to be here. That's something very special, and we are indeed being thoughtful about their requirements as well. So with that in mind, I want to invite you then to turn to the Malchuyot service. And again, we're on page 199. According to Rabbi Rabbah, the Holy One said on Rosh Hashanah, recite before me words of Malchuyot, sovereignty, zichronot, remembrance, and shofarot. Sovereignty, so that you may acknowledge me as ruler over you. Remembrance, so that remembrances of you may rise up favorably before me. And how shall all of this be accomplished? Why, of course, through the sounds of the shofar.
Like musical preludes, 3 traditional motifs announce the highest peak of Rosh Hashanah, the calls of the shofar. The ancient sounds that we call tikiyah, shivarim, truah, and tikiyah gedolah.
The first motif is Malchuyot, sovereignty. Here on the first day of the year, we encounter the challenges of the Aleinu prayer, to reflect on our unique identity as Jews, to meditate on what it means to praise God as the all-sovereign, the monarch of all, and to bow in reverence and submission to the creator of all.
Passages from Torah, Psalms, and prophets encourage us to consider the ways that God's power is expressed in our lives, as well as on the role of the human spirit in the fulfillment of Zechariah's prophecy. On that day, God shall be one, and God's name shall be one.
Page 202, we invite you to rise for the great Aleinu.
ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה שלא שם חלקנו ככם וגורלנו ככל העולם ואנחנו
sleepers from your sleep, rouse yourselves from your slumber. Awake like Israel at the sea to the joyful song of Miriam and Moses. Sing to the Eternal, for God has surged in triumph. The Eternal shall reign forever and ever. Awake like Israel at Sinai to the dignity of being God's partners. You shall be for me a holy nation, a sovereign community of priests. Examine your deeds and return to God. Remember your Creator, you who are caught up in the daily routine, losing sight of eternal truth. You who waste your years in vain pursuits that neither profit nor save. Hear the rousing call to repentance. With trumpets and the blast of shofar, raise a shout before the eternal, the sovereign. Hear and know the truth of a higher power. God is sovereign, robed in majesty. God is clothed with strength, so the world stands firm and cannot be shaken. Return to God by pursuing justice and right. Majestic one who loves justice, you who established equity, you worked righteous judgment for Jacob. Look to your souls, improve your ways and your deeds. Let each of us abandon our evil ways, forsake our unworthy schemes. Arise and see the glory of all being. Open yourselves to the light of God. Awake, awake, O Zion. Clothe yourselves in splendor, put on your robes of majesty. Listen well, in silence and stillness is the voice of God. There was a great, mighty wind, splitting mountains and shattering rocks, but the Eternal was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake, but the Eternal was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, fire, but the Eternal was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. Through worthy deeds, bring near the day of unity and goodness, a glimpse of perfection. Together Adonai shall reign over all the earth. On that day God shall be one and God's name shall be one. Listen, Israel, Adonai is our God. Adonai is one, page 206.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishma kol shofar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. Amen.
Before I call shofar, I want to acknowledge Babette Krolik, who has been calling the shofar notes longer than I have been rabbi of the Brooklyn Heights Synagogue. So this year we could not extend that honor in the sanctuary, but I want Babette and the congregation to know that this is something that is not a mere honor. It has been a task of love for these many, many years, and I look forward to Babette calling the shofar notes next year when I will happily retire from this particular responsibility. Stuart, are you ready out there? Tekiah! Shavarim Teruah.
Like on the street.
Tekiah. Tekiah. Shivarim. Tekiah. Tekiah. Teruah. Kia. Yesher Koach, together, page 207. Today the world is born anew. This day the whole of creation stands before you to be judged. As we are your children, love us in the way of mothers and fathers. As we are yours in service, guide us by the light of your justice, grace, and holiness. I invite those who wish to remain standing to do so. If you wish to have a seat, we'll ask you to rise again for the sounding of the shofar. We are at page 264. We read responsively. Zichronot, the divine awakens within us. The divine awakens within us a sudden awareness of your presence, O God. Seeing signs of your compassion, we say, God remembered. God remembered Noah and all the beasts that were with him in the ark. And God caused a wind to blow across the earth, and the waters subsided. When cruelty and hate diminish, we say, God remembered. The Israelites were groaning under the bondage and cried out, God hearing their moaning, and God remembered the covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Surprised by joy, we say, God remembered. Then God remembered Rachel, and God gave heed to her and opened her womb. Overcoming anger, finding strength to forgive, we say God remembered. God remembered the covenant and with great love had a change of heart. The divine awakens within us, a sudden awareness of your presence, O God. When we feel our kinship with all creatures of the earth, we say, God, remember. I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures. When we long to be forgiven, we say, God, remember. Adonai, remember your compassion and your faithfulness. They are old as time. Remember not the wrongs of my youth and my defiance. The divine awakens within us a sudden awareness of your presence. Overcome by awe in places of grandeur, we say, God remembers. God sustains the reverent. God remembers the covenant forever. When memories of the Exodus are renewed, we say, God remembers. Thus said Adonai, I remember the devotion of your youth, your love as a bride, how you followed me in the wilderness, a land unsown. The divine awakens within us a sudden awareness of your presence. Even when sorrow is in our heart, we say, God will remember. Truly, Ephraim is my precious child, my delight. And though I speak against him, I remember him with tenderness. That is why my heart yearns for him. I will receive him back in love, declares Adonai. When we remember who we are, we say, God will remember. I will remember for their sake the covenant of the ancients, whom I freed from the land of Egypt, in the sight of the nations, to be their God. I, Adonai. We are on page 266 at the bottom as we join together in the Chatima Baruch Atah Adonai, Zocher Habrit v'ne'eman b'brito, v'kayam b'ma'amaro, source of blessing. Eternal our God, you remember the covenant, keep faith with the covenant, and sustain your promise forever. Together on page 267, God of remembrance, remember the covenant of our ancestors. We reaffirm it today. Remember, we are a people of noble ideals. Help us attain them. Remember all your people, all the nations on the road to peace, and bless their efforts. Remember with mercy the binding of Isaac, the sorrow of Sarah, Abraham's words, here I am, Hineni. Our memory fades, but you remember all that we have forgotten. Your presence is a throne where all things matter and nothing is lost. Baruch Atah Adonai, Zocher haberit, blessed are you, Adonai. You remember the covenant and you remember us. Okay, I think Zoe is blowing this set. Tell me when. Tekiah! Shivarim teruah! Tekiah! Tekiah! Shivarim! Tekiah! Tekiah! Teruah! Tekiah! Yesh Koyach, page 269 together. Today the world is born anew. This day the whole of creation stands before you to be judged. As we are your children, love us in the way of mothers and fathers. As we are yours in service, guide us by the light of your justice, grace, and holiness. We turn ahead to the final sounding of shofar, Shofar Road, page 278. Again, I invite those who wish to have a seat until the sounding of shofar the last time, if you wish to do so. If not, I invite you to remain standing. Page 278. Prayers for the third and final sounding of the shofar evoke the revelation at Mount Sinai, when the people experienced God amidst thunder and lightning and a dense cloud upon the mountain, and a very loud blast of the horn, Kol shofar chazak ma'od. The shofar's blast, a sound conveying warning, triumph, and celebration, here marks a moment of intense spiritual elevation, when a band of newly liberated slaves entered a sacred covenant with the divine.
The shofar, according to Midrash, signifies freedom. In ancient Israel, it was sounded to announce the coming of the Jubilee in the 50th year, a time of liberation for servants and restoration of land for the poor. In the Jewish imagination, the shofar blast remains a symbol of the here and now redemption for which Jews have prayed since we first stood at the shore of the Sea of Reeds. In our own time as well, we pray for freedom from violence, persecution, and injustice.
Page 282. You revealed your glory, a presence and a cloud, and a people became holy when you spoke with them. Amid thunder and lightning, you made yourself known. With blasting shofar, you appeared. God revealed to us and to our ancestors before us, God of revelation. Play the song of our freedom on the great shofar. Let your banner fly over the gathering of our exiles. Bring back the dispersed. Let those who are scattered find their way home. Let joyful songs of Zion greet us in Jerusalem, your holy city, the place of our people's eternal happiness. Livriut. We are on page 284. I'll invite all to rise for this final sounding of the shofar. Page 284. Tekiah! Shavarim Teruah! Tekiah! Tekiah! Shivarim! Tekiah! Tekiah! Teruah! Tekiah Gedolah! Yesher Koyach. Together, page 285. Today the world is born anew. This day the whole of creation stands before you to be judged. As we are your children, love us in the way of mothers and fathers. As we are yours in service, guide us by the light of your justice, grace, and holiness. I invite you to remain standing as we turn to Eitz Chaim P on page 277. Eitz Chaim P for the returning of the Torah to the Ark, page 277.
תורתי אל תעזובו, עץ חיים היא, למלך חזק עמה, ותאמרה מאושר, דרכך תרחנו עם, בכל נתיבותיך שלום.
Aleinu is a vision of what will be. Kaddish, which comes next, is a vision of the value of life and what has passed, an affirmation that each and every life is of meaning. This is an appropriate place then to share a vision of where we are going as a congregation. Last night, our president, Marcia Bellows, made a brief mention of the tremendous success of both our capital campaign and building project. As Marcia informed us, New Heights, our capital campaign, has achieved 80% of its fundraising goals. That success has allowed us to finance the current building project that has been ongoing and strip down our annex building, 127th Street, to its barest bones, secure and rebuild its floors, its internal structures, and the backyard. Over the summer, we also did major work in the cellar and the 3rd and 4th floors of 131 Remsen Street, as well as renovating the bathrooms on the upper levels. Future fire-rated walkthroughs between the two buildings were opened on each floor, then sealed up to be finished next summer. All of this has taken place in the midst of COVID, and much of the work during the operation of the BHS preschool. It borders on the miraculous. When we finish next fall, we will have 2 interconnected buildings with new security, a new entrance, expanded utilization, especially of our 2nd floor social space. We look forward finally to hosting events that can comfortably seat 150 people, if not more. For brisses, baby namings, bar and bat mitzvahs, weddings, and much more, this represents a significant expansion and response to the needs and the desires of our growing community. As many of you know, our aspirations at BHS are big, even though we're in a little space. But we are also a responsible community. When Deb and I made our first, and at the time the largest ever pledge we'd made to any charitable undertaking, it was to an earlier campaign to renovate what was still mostly a men's eating club, the Brooklyn Club that BHS had purchased and just moved into. None of our kids were yet conceived. Years later, Michael, Alex, and Rissa, now on the scene, we decided to join the Growing Together campaign that allowed us to purchase 127 Remsen Street and very modestly renovate a single lower floor for classrooms. When the time came 4 years ago, and we saw as a community that we could not let 4 floors of 127 continue to sit empty, Deb and I, after much consideration and review, stretched and pledged and joined the BHS New Heights Capital campaign. Michael, Alex, and Rissa are years past their brisses, baby namings, bar, bat mitzvah. Michael is now a college sophomore, and Alex and Rissa, high school seniors, beginning their own applications for college. Deb and I decided to join the campaign not simply or even primarily because I am and have been the rabbi of BHS these past 24 years, although of course that is an element. But not every congregational rabbi does, by the way. We decided to join and participate in the campaign for 3 reasons. 1, BHS needed our participation. 2, we had resources, and we wanted to be good role models for our friends, our community, and other members of the congregation. And 3, because of my grandfather. Some of you have heard this story before, so please forgive me. Sam Lipschitz was born somewhere near Grodno in 1905. And he was snuck into this country somewhere across the Canadian border by his mom, my great-grandmother Lena. He found in America a land of opportunity, but also of discrimination and anti-Semitism. He met and married my grandmother, Ray Berkowitz, and together they had 3 kids. Their oldest, Nina, my aunt who just passed away 2 weeks ago, Thank you for all of you who've sent condolences. It's been a very hard loss. My dad, Michael, who died when I was a boy, and the youngest of them, Maxine, who died in the 1980s. They were all born Lipschitz. My grandpa Sam opened a shoe store where he sold various lines, including hush puppies, which I wore as a youngster. At some time in my dad's childhood, Sam decided to change the family name to the less Jewish-sounding Lip. And here I am today as Rabbi Lip. I'm not sure it made such a great difference, but that's another conversation for another day. At some point in my childhood, between crawling under my grandparents' Seder tables at Passover and receiving Eisenhower silver dollars for each night of Hanukkah, I must have overheard, I think far more than once, my grandfather Sam's wisdom regarding supporting synagogues. As a Jew in New York City back in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, Mr. Lipschitz's membership and money was undesired and certainly unwelcome in many organizations and institutions in this great city, but not at a synagogue. The synagogue, as my grandpa Sam would tell it, had to accept his membership, and they had to take his money because he was a Jew. Imagine. And because of this, my grandfather felt a loyalty and an obligation to the community and the institution. It was not a perfect relationship for sure. That's another conversation for another day. But that sense of loyalty and obligation never waned. That story has inspired me since I was a young child, and of course it had some role in my choice of career and profession. So this morning I know I'm already preaching to the choir, expanded, as it were. We have weathered the pandemic far better than many other local synagogues. Our membership numbers dipped but did not crash, and we already are seeing applications for new members. When all of us showed up to join BHS, we know there was already a community here, there was an institution, and there was a building, at least for most of us. It had been established by the generation or generations that came before us. They did not establish the Brooklyn Heights Synagogue just for themselves or just for their time frame. Like my grandfather Sam, they knew they were creating something for future generations, a legacy for the Jewish people here in Brownstone, Brooklyn, and in New York City. As of today, roughly 1/3 of our membership has joined the BHS New Heights Capital campaign by making a multi-year pledge. Thank you, thank you, thank you. In doing so, as Marcia Bellows mentioned, we have raised remarkably 80% of the funds needed to complete our project. And as I said, that's allowed us to finance and start the remarkable construction undertaking you can see safely from the sidewalk when you walk by 127 Remsen Street. If you haven't done it, today's a beautiful day. But we need to finish our fundraising efforts and raise the last 20%, which is under $2 million, to be pledged out over the next 5 years. We are a congregation currently of 465 family member units, more or less. I want to personally invite those amongst the 2/3 of the BHS membership who have not yet joined the campaign to please do so in 5,782. Today's the first day. I realize that because of COVID and other factors, some of us are honestly still not in any position to do so at the moment. But as I mentioned in my sermon last evening, whether by luck or by resource or both, Many of us have made it through the last 18 months securely. Some of us are even doing better than expected. So please, if that is your case and you've been putting off joining the campaign, now is the time. We need you. If you'd be interested in speaking with our chairs, Susan Chaddock, Susan, stand up, please. And Dave Smetana. Dave, are you here or are you online? I think Dave is, stand up on Zoom, Dave. I know they would welcome your email or call or text. And remember, Lipschitz or lip, it doesn't matter. We have to take your contribution. We turn to the mourner's Kaddish, just a Kaddish and then a few announcements, and we're out the door for Tashlich. If you have the name of a loved one that you are reciting, let me invite all to, before we rise, let me just, if you have a name that you'd like to share before Kaddish aloud as my hand comes across the room.
Easter and Esther Shapiro, Pearl Chaya, Reza Libby, Yisrael and Moshe Shapiro, Francis Shapiro, and Ray Scammell.
Thank you. Please rise, everyone. We join together in sanctifying their names and memories, even as we sanctify God's name and pray for the coming of God's realm. Page 292, the Mourner's Kaddish, page 292. We join together. Yit Gadal, V'yit Kadash, Shemei Rabbah. V'yalma Divrach Chirutei, V'yamlich Malchutei, V'chaye Chon, V'yomei Chon, V'chaye D'chol Beit Yisrael, V'agalau V'zman Kari V'imru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah, Mivarach, L'olam Olam Almayim. Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpar, V'yitromam, V'yitnasei, V'yitadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shemei D'kudsha B'ripu. Leila min kol birchata b'shirata, tushbechata b'nechemata, damiran b'yalma v'imru amen. Yehei shlamma rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, uyasei shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru amen.
Oseh shalom b'mromav, uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, yaseh Shalom aleinu ve'al kol yoshvei tevel.
Amen. You'll find the text of our closing song, Hayom, on page 294. Immediately following Hayom, a couple of things, little business. Please return your prayer books to the ushers in the back so that they can be boxed and returned. Please do not leave them in the pews. Please return the prayer books. Really important. We've got limited people to help with that. If you're not going down to Tashlich, we need 4 able-bodied people to walk the Torah scrolls, 3 here and 1 over with the religious school, back over to 131. You can go pop your head in and look at what 127 looks like. So we need 4 people to walk the Torah scrolls over. That's super important. Services tonight, 6:30 at BHS, tomorrow morning, 10:30 a.m. And again, we'll be walking with police escort immediately when we're done with Hayom down to the far side of Fulton Land, wherever we end up, down at Fulton Landing for Tashlich.
Hayom, 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 hayom te'artzenu.
Amen.
Hayom, 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 hayom tevarchenu. Amen. Hayom, 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 hayom. Hayom tegadlenu.
Amen.
Hayom, 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 hayom tidrashenu letova.
Amen.
Hayom, 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 hayom tichtavenu lechayim tovim.
Amen.
Hayom, 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 tishma shavatenu. Amen. Hayom, 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 titmechenu b'mitzikecha. Amen.
Shana Tova, good Yontif.
Shana Tova. Good singing.